Hey everyone, I'm Vladimir Jutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors behind me. These are feeds coming into the CBS Broadcast Center from all of our stations and affiliates around the country. If it's happening out there, we're going to bring it to you live right here. Let's begin. Vice President Harris has a new tactic she's using in her campaign events, and former President Trump is hoping to make inroads with black voters today. We're covering their battleground state strategies. In just moments, the former special prosecutor in Donald Trump's election interference case out of Georgia is set to take questions from House lawmakers, what we know about the closed-door session and what the Republican-led committee wants to know. And we are on the ground in Florida following the efforts to rebuild after Hurricane Milton's direct hit. This is CBS News 24/7. All right, folks, we are less than three weeks until Election Day, and many voters are already casting their ballots this week for early voting in some key battleground states. The next few days will be critical for Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. The vice president is headed to Detroit, and Trump will reach out to Illinois and Georgia voters as they head to the polls for that early voting we've been telling you about. We have team coverage of the election countdown. CBS News campaign reporter Nidia Cavazos is following the Harris campaign, and Libby Cathy is on the trail with Trump. We're going to begin, though, with Nidia. So, Nidia, Harris is continuing that campaign blitz. She's in Detroit. Who is the vice president expected to sit down with today?
Good morning, Vlad. The vice president is expected to sit down for a radio interview with Charlamagne tha God, and this is for his radio program, The Breakfast Club. And we know this is big among black voters, and this is all part of Harris's attempts to continue to shore up support and court this community of voters. And of course, this is a perfect platform for her to be able to communicate a couple of her items on her agenda that she recently unveiled that specifically targets black men here in Detroit and across the country.
As you know, Nidia, absentee voting has already started in Michigan, and we're just days away from statewide early voting. What are you hearing from the Harris camp about these strategies in the last couple of weeks of campaigning?
What's left for up until Election Day, we're 3 weeks out, and really what the strategy here and the goal for the Harris campaign is to continue to reach voters where they're at. This is a big part of what they've always emphasized, reach voters where they're at. So this means campaigning in their cities, reaching out in ways that they can actually get to them and, for example, get out the vote efforts, door knocking, a lot of community events, and we're going to continue to see this throughout the next few weeks.
All right, Nidia, thanks very much. Appreciate that. Let's pivot now to Libby Cathy. She's following the Trump campaign this morning for us. So Libby, let's talk about Donald Trump. And he's headed to Georgia. Early voting has already begun. And there are some new rules in the state Republicans have been lobbying for. I saw Speaker Mike Johnson on Face the Nation talking about the efforts that Republicans have made to change some of the rules, in his words, to prevent election fraud, even though most folks say that there isn't widespread election fraud. But what are you hearing about his plans today?
Yeah, good morning, Vlad. So former President Donald Trump returning to battleground Georgia today for two campaign events. The first is a town hall, and this one is notable because it's an all-female audience. This comes, of course, as we know, Trump is struggling to close that gender gap with Vice President Kamala Harris. More men gravitating to him, but more women, by and large, gravitating towards her. So this is part of that effort to court suburban women. That's what we're going to see today, and as well as black voters. After that town hall, he has a rally here in Atlanta, Georgia, and that message is going to be get out the vote, and get out the vote early. A little bit different than what we heard from him in 2020. And we do hear him walk on that message a little bit sometimes, but his campaign wants him to say, get out the vote early here in Georgia as early voting is underway behind me. 3 weeks to go until the election, Vlad.
So, Libby, we were just showing some video from a campaign event yesterday that the president was at with Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota. And let me ask you about that, because I know you've been covering the Trump campaign for a long time. There's a moment that a lot of people are talking about this morning where the former president just stood on stage for 30 minutes awkwardly while a greatest hits of his favorite songs played, and people filed out of that auditorium or that space, wherever that was. What can you tell me about that and what the campaign is saying this morning about what the former president was signaling?
Yeah, Vlad. So this was a town hall in Oaks, Pennsylvania last night, and for lack of better words, it kind of went off the rails. People are calling it bizarre this morning, but the Trump campaign is calling it, quote, a love fest. They think that this was a show of love, and what this was supposed to be was a town hall moderated by Kristi Noem, where Trump was answering questions from voters in Pennsylvania. But there was some medical incidents in the crowd. 2 people ended up fainting, and after that, he never ended up taking questions again, the former president. He ended up at one point saying, no one wants to hear questions anyway, let's just hear some music, and went on to play 40 minutes of songs. He stood on stage kind of bopping and dancing, and people kind of just stood there, some leaving, but some just videotaping the former president. So tonight, I think at this town hall in Cumming, Georgia, I think the women there are hoping to hear more answers from the former president. Maybe Harris Faulkner, the Fox News moderator, will keep it more on message. But last night, definitely more bizarre Trump event that we've seen this election cycle.
Yeah. And let me ask you one last question, Libby. Vice President Harris has been replaying some of former President Trump's words that he's used at his rallies and in certain interviews that indicate that he would use the military, for example, to go after his political opponents or leftists. In other words, talking about immigration, sure, which a lot of people say is a problem, but also saying that he's going to use the powers of the federal government to go after his political enemies. I wonder if the Trump campaign has responded to the vice president's use of his own words at her rallies to rally voters to her cause.
Yeah, well, you bring up this enemies rhetoric. This came on Sunday. The former president interviewed with Fox News said that there are enemies from within as well, and talked about, yes, using the military to get at those enemies, and talked about using the military even before taking office again, if he were to. Vice President Kamala Harris is saying, listen to the former president's words, let them speak for himself. She says these are the words of an autocrat, someone who is threatening to use the military in this way. And yes, we've heard him talk about using the military with immigration. And of course, Vice President Kamala Harris denounces some of that as well. But this takes it to another level, using it on political enemies. He talks about Nancy Pelosi and Harris herself. So this is why the Vice President Kamala Harris just says, let Trump do the arguments for them. They think that he can dig his own hole, if you will. But today in Georgia, the Trump campaign definitely hoping he stays on message, trying to court those suburban women voters. And Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, we're not sure if he's going to be on the campaign trail with Trump today, but Trump does know he's hugely popular in this state. Was seen with him earlier this month for Hurricane Helene efforts. And last time Trump had a rally in Atlanta, I will say he told this huge crowd of supporters that Kemp, is disloyal. We'll see if he changes that messaging 3 weeks out with the hugely popular governor and other Republicans in the state who will be watching and trying to make sure that there's no efforts to overturn the election again this time. As you say, he is still under criminal charges here in Fulton County for that. And we'll see this continue as Nathan Wade is answering questions at the House today. Lots going on, Vlad.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing how that interaction, if there is one, between the governor and the former president happens. Libby, Kathy, for us, always excellent reporting and analysis. My friend, thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, Floridians are still picking up the pieces days after Hurricane Milton struck the state last week. Fuel is slowly returning to the state after an initial shortage in the aftermath of that storm. CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff joins me now to talk more about it. Dave, good to see you, my friend. So what are some of the challenges that Floridians are facing still in the aftermath of this hurricane?
Vlad, there are so many challenges. One of them, sand. It is everywhere here in Manasota Key. So how do you get rid of that? Let me show you the ballet of heavy equipment that's going on right behind us. We've got the wheel loader, we've got the bulldozer, the excavator, and also this dump truck that is coming in right now. So the sand is everywhere in the neighborhoods. The dump trucks, and you're about to see it pull up, and it will dump some of this sand back onto the beach. This is coming from the streets and people's houses and people's businesses. That dumps into here. Then the wheel loader takes that sand and it pushes it onto this giant hill. You can see that it's actually much taller than some of these big trees that are out here. And then the excavator and the bulldozer take over when they flatten it out over there. So they're trying to get all this sand out of the way here on Manasota Key. But on the other side of Florida, we have the opposite problem where in years past they've been re-nourishing these beaches, or the beaches on the west side, like say on the east side of Florida, say we have Miami Beach, and they have to re-nourish that with more sand. Now we've got too much sand on this side of the beach, so we have to put it somewhere, and this is a large crew who, Vlad, they're taking all this stuff and putting it back here. So that's just the first part of this operation. Imagine how much is going on with removing all of the debris that has to go into this. We've got streets that are lined with debris, and we're talking about parts of homes, parts of businesses. Some of it could be toxic heavy metals because there are TVs in there and electronics and all sorts of things that have been crushed by this hurricane. 2 hurricanes in a row. We had Helene, then we had Milton, and this area is still in the cleanup zone, Vlad. So we've got this giant operation that keeps on going on here while we've got people dealing with the gas situation and also the power situation. Many places around here don't have any power, and they're just getting the ports up and running right now so they can bring in more gas. So most people are back up with their power, about 90% of Floridians, but there are still some businesses and some households that are without power at this point. So it ain't over yet here on the west coast of Florida. We are still dealing with this, and if you look on the map, Vlad, if you look on the new models, you can see that there are still things brewing in the Caribbean and the Gulf that could be coming for the U.S. We will have to see how those model runs go, because this hurricane season is not over. We still have a lot of cleanup to do and a lot of warmth out there in the ocean as well.
We do indeed. Dave Malkoff reporting on the still headaches for a lot of people in the wake of Hurricane Milton. My friend, thank you very much. Speaking of this weather pattern that Dave just referenced, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore. The first look at the national forecast. Grant, you just heard there from Malkoff that there are still things brewing out there in the middle of the ocean.
You got to keep a close eye on the tropics this time of year, Vlad. You got some cold fronts that are taking in from the north. Sometimes those cold fronts can be a focus for some of that development in the tropics because of all the warm water that Dave was talking about. Now, yes, there are 2 systems that we're watching, and I do want to focus on this first one in the Western Caribbean first. This one's the same area that Helene and Milton developed from. Now, look, the models have been very inconsistent with the development of this. Right now, only a 30% chance of tropical development over the next 7 days, so not a big concern there. Something that has a slightly better chance of development is this tropical wave moving across the Atlantic right now. It could develop as it approaches portions of the northeastern Caribbean up towards Hispaniola. 60% chance of that system developing into a tropical depression or a tropical storm. Neither of those systems really have a good chance of approaching the United States because of this cold front that is sagging in from the north and high pressure pushing in from the north. That's also keeping a lot of that development away. Now, that said, we are seeing some showers, rain and snow showers across portions of anywhere from the mid-Appalachians all the way into the Northeast. Some places continuing to see some snow showers and even some light snow accumulation. Kind of early for it, but still, here we are with some of that cold Canadian air sinking in from the north today. Just to look across the nation, you've got the cooler temperatures across most of the eastern half. Record heat in Texas. We'll talk more about this. Still talking about record heat as we head into the middle of October. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant Gilmore for us this morning. We'll check in with you a little bit later, my friend. Thanks. Folks, just minutes ago, the newest residents of the Smithsonian National Zoo touched down right near Washington, D.C. You need a hint? Check out this plane. Do you see what's on the nose? It's a cute little panda eating what looks to be bamboo. How are these pandas still around? How are they not extinct? We're going to explain why and why they're so cute. That's coming up. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Officials in Ukraine say at least 1 person has died and 23 others were wounded in an overnight Russian missile attack on the southern city of Mykolaiv. The attack started several fires in the city, according to emergency services. Ukraine's military says Russia launched 17 drones and 2 missiles in attacks over other regions in Ukraine, saying its Air Force shot down 12 of those drones. All right, let's turn now to the Middle East, where the region is bracing for Israel's expected retaliation against Iran's massive missile attack 2 weeks ago. According to the Washington Post, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may be signaling to the United States that he'll hit military targets, but not nuclear or energy facilities. Our Ramy Inocencio is following the latest from Tel Aviv. Ramy, good morning.
Vlad, hi there. The office of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told CBS News that it listens to the opinions of the American administration, but that they will make their final decisions based on Israel's national interests. Netanyahu met with wounded soldiers at the Golani army base that was targeted in that deadly Hezbollah drone strike from Sunday. He pledged to keep hitting the militant group without mercy everywhere in Lebanon, and that includes Beirut. The goal, to return some 70,000 displaced Israelis back to their homes in northern Israel. On Israel's southern front, at least 15 Gazans died in strikes overnight. That's according to the Hamas-run health ministry. And the White House is calling an airstrike on the grounds of Al-Aqsa Hospital, which burned displaced citizens alive. Horrifying. The IDF says it targeted terrorists nearby. All this as Israel is expected to retaliate soon against Iran for its attack on October 1st. This morning, local media report the Israeli government has agreed on what targets it will strike in Iran and when it will strike. Vlad.
All right, Ramy, thank you very much. The National Security Council is responding to disturbing images circulating on social media following that recent airstrike that Ramy just reported on. A spokesperson released a statement reading in part, quote, Israel has a responsibility to do more to avoid civilian casualties, and what happened here is horrifying, even if Hamas was operating near the hospital in an attempt to use civilians as human shields. Chief White House correspondent for CBS News, Nancy Cordes, is joining me now from the White House to talk more about this from the perspective of the Biden administration. So, Nancy, good to see you. What are you hearing from the White House about this latest attack? Has the White House commented on it? And let's talk about that missile system that the United States is sending to Israel.
That's right, Vlad. Good morning. We received word from the Pentagon that some U.S. personnel and initial components for the THAAD battery have now arrived in Israel. THAAD is one of the most advanced missile defense systems that the U.S. has. The president approved sending that system over to Israel along with about 100 U.S. troops who operate it, and those troops have begun to arrive as well. This is a system that is designed to shoot down ballistic missiles as Israel braces for more incoming from Hezbollah and from Iran. Yes, Israel does have its famed Iron Dome, but there are still missiles here and there that have been able to get through those defenses, and this THAAD battery is designed to help with that. But this is a major moment, Vlad. Up until now, the U.S. has obviously provided a lot of military aid, a lot of money. This is the first time that the U.S. is actually committing U.S. troops to this ongoing effort. And so it really, ties the U.S. closer to Israel and gets the U.S. more involved in a very real way with this conflict.
And Nancy, really quickly on that strike that is supposedly to come from Israel directly on Iran. Has Israel shared? I know that we just reported that Israel is saying that they're not going to hit nuclear facilities, only military ones, non-nuclear ones. But have they shared those target lists with the United States? What are you hearing?
We're not hearing a lot. Typically, U.S. officials don't share with us what, if anything, they are learning from the Israelis. And often, when events like this take place, they actually go to great lengths to say that they weren't alerted in advance of the targets that the Israelis were going to strike because they don't want to have their fingerprints on the operation. They don't want to be tied to the Israelis. They don't want anyone blaming the U.S. for any of the missiles that strike their targets.
All right, Nancy, I know we're talking about some serious stuff here. Let's lighten it up just a little bit for our viewers and talk about another type of diplomacy. I'm talking panda diplomacy. What is the update on the new tenants of the National Zoo? They were showing, I don't know if you can see return, Nancy, we're showing live pictures from Dulles. Okay, so you can see.
I see it.
Yeah, so what do we know?
Big breaking news, Vlad. I know you broke it there on your show that the FedEx Panda Express has indeed landed at Dulles Airport a short time ago. Very precious cargo on board. 2 adolescent pandas. They're 3 years old. Their names are Bao Li and Qing Bao. They made the long trip over from China to the U.S. Very delicate diplomacy, as you noted, taking place between the U.S. and China over many months to enable the National Zoo right here in Washington to have pandas once again after a year-long lapse. We've got a 50-year history of raising and breeding pandas here in this city, and so now these two are back. The zoo goers who love the pandas and flock to the zoo by the millions every year will have to wait a little bit longer to see them, though. The zoo is closed today as they allow these two new residents to get used to their new surroundings and to sleep off some of the jet lag.
Yeah, because even pandas get jet lag. I just love, there's something about this panda diplomacy, Nancy, the cynic in me, cynical journalist in me that says, I understand that China may perhaps be an adversary to the United States, or perhaps they see us as an adversary. But if we can do this, if we can get two little cute cultural icons that represent that country here in the United States so that people feel a little bit closer to China and the Chinese, I'm all for it. I think it's really cool. I did joke earlier that if you ever watch those cute panda videos of them like falling out of trees and like it's a miracle. Part of it is kind of humorous that they're still around all these millions of years later. And part of it is sad because we've destroyed their natural habitat. And the reason that they're around is because humans keep them around.
Yeah. Vlad, like any good journalist, I can tell you I have been studying the photos and the videos of these two from China, and I can report exclusively that they are extremely adorable.
As are you, Nancy. We appreciate it. You're adorable as well. Thank you for that reporting, as always, my friend.
Right
we'll talk to you later. Thank you. All right, back to some hard news now. There's been an arrest that's been made in the United States regarding FEMA and its operations in North Carolina. We're going to take you there after the break. Stay put with us. Here's a look at some of the top stories we are following. Canada and India have expelled each other's top diplomats as relations between countries worsen. The move follows the assassination of a Sikh separatist leader in Canada last year. The Canadian government said yesterday 6 Indian diplomats were being expelled over possible links to the murder. They also allege a broader effort to target Indian dissidents in the country. India rejected the accusations and expelled 6 Canadian diplomats. All right, North Korea has destroyed sections of unused roads and rail lines connected to South Korea. It appears to be a move to sever connections between the North and South. Pyongyang recently accused Seoul of flying its drone over its territory. In response, South Korea's military fired warning shots near the heavily fortified border. Survivors of Maine's deadliest shooting and loved ones of those killed have taken their first step toward a lawsuit. Lawyers representing them filed notices of claim with the Army and the Army hospital. They claim the Army knew about the shooter's mental health issues and could have stopped him. You might remember the gunman was an Army reservist who killed 18 people at a bowling alley in a bar last October. The Army has 6 months to respond. FEMA has resumed normal operations in North Carolina. The agency scaled back recovery efforts in one county due to an armed threat against its workers. One man was arrested in connection with the threat. CBS News correspondent Janet Shamblian is in North Carolina monitoring recovery efforts and joins me now to discuss. Janet, it's good to see you. What are you hearing about residents and their very long road to recovery? I saw your piece this morning on CBS Mornings. It really, really was tragic.
I want to tell you, Vlad, about this one community called Chimney Rock. I was here last week in the aftermath of Helene. We were not able to get in because it was completely cut off. And when they were finally able to open one access way, it was only for Army troops, first responders, and people who lived there. But yesterday we were able to get in for the first time, and I know we have some pictures of this. It's just shocking. It's beyond any damage I've seen throughout this region in western North Carolina, which is so badly hit from Asheville to the east. And the homes are just ripped in half along this river, and you could see the beds and the toys and the refrigerators just dangling. It's only a town of 125 people. It's along Lake Lure. It serves primarily a tourist population. It's just such a cute little quaint town, and every building in town is filled at least to the second floor with mud. And so now they've established one access road in. People are able to come back. There was one life lost there, but this is a town that is going to take years to recover. And yet the resilience from the people there, I talked to a couple of business owners who own a hotel, and they're hoping to open it in a couple of weeks, if that's even possible, to house first responders. But just the scope of the devastation and the fact that we're about to go into week 3 here, and we know we had Milton where you were covering for such a period of time, and still here it looks like this happened yesterday, Vlad.
Yeah, that's what I kept thinking about, Janet, when I saw your piece, that it looked like it's brand new. What are some of the residents telling you about what they're going to do and what they're hoping, not just from a federal response, but even a local response?
Universally, they don't have insurance, and that is tragic. And even those who have insurance, it is not covering the flood, right? So what they told me is that they are overwhelmed by the volunteer help, churches, missions, volunteer groups coming from other parts of the country, and digging out wheelbarrow by wheelbarrow the first floor of their homes of mud while they take a breather or in fact try to help someone else. So most are committed to staying. I think you'll find people who will say that I'm not going to do this again, but most are committed to rebuilding. But you almost don't know where to start. Look at the scene behind me right now. I mean, this is repeated block by block by block here in the community of Old Fort, where we are talking to you from. Where do you start 2 weeks after? It's just mud. I mean, do you tear the whole thing down? So there's a lot of confusion about insurance, what's going to be covered. But they are, Vlad, as to your question, so grateful for the local help, for the FEMA help. And really, I have to say, it's just such a massive volunteer effort like nothing I've ever seen.
I think it's important, incredibly important, that you're there, Janet, keeping the light shining on the people there, because it's been 3 weeks, and I can't imagine being in those conditions for that length of time. And I know that it's probably not going to change in the next couple of days either. So I'm really grateful to you for spending some time with us, sharing their stories. Thank you, Janet Shamlian. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast.
The one silver lining, Vlad, is that it looks like portions of the Appalachians are going to continue to deal with relatively dry weather. There is a small chance of rain in portions of western North Carolina today. There's an upper-level low-pressure system that's spinning, and it is bringing a little bit of rain to portions of the eastern half of the United States. You see on the radar there some of those scattered showers, but a lot of that rain's not going to make it up over the western slopes of the Appalachians into those eastern slopes. Meanwhile, that upper level low is really funneling in some cooler air. Look at some of those high temperatures there from New York City up to Portland, only seeing high temperatures in the 50s today. Meanwhile, head south with me. We talked about this briefly earlier on. Texas dealing with some big time heat. Look at Waco, high temperatures near 98 degrees today, 97 degrees in Houston, New Orleans at 84 degrees. But again, it's this cooler feel. Head over to the map here with me. We'll drop down this map. We'll look at the radar here over a good portion of the eastern half of the United States. A good scattering of showers. It is relatively light. Western North Carolina, about a 20% chance for some rain today. But if you look north, this air coming in out of Canada is producing some snow showers as well. Small chance in the higher elevations of some very light accumulating snow. Again, those are towards the peaks. Maybe a half inch, like a dusting of snow, but a little bit more snow accumulation up towards the Adirondacks, the Green Mountains, and the White Mountains as we head through the next couple of days. I mentioned the heat in Texas, quite the contrast from those cooler, more November-like temperatures in the Northeast. Austin, Texas, reaching for 99 degrees this afternoon. The record is 95. San Antonio, College Station, Waco, Texas, all at 96 this afternoon, rivaling some of those record high temperatures. Houston looking at a high of 95 today. The record today in Houston is 92 degrees. But the eastern half of the United States, the main story are those cooler than normal temperatures. Temperatures running 10 to 20 degrees cooler than normal in some spots. You've got mid-50s from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Cincinnati at 53 with some scattered showers. Still pretty warm for the cleanup from Milton and Helene across portions of central Florida. There's that record heat in Texas. Back to the desert Southwest. I mean, it's still hot, but nowhere near as hot as it was earlier this month. And then you go back into September where you had that long stretch of temperatures there in the triple digits. Also, another storm system approaching the Pacific Northwest, bringing cooler and rainy conditions there as well. Quick note on the tropics. We do have a couple of systems that we're watching. This one right here, a 60% chance of development. Both of those systems, Vlad, not expected to impact the United States at this time. Back to you.
All right, Grant, thanks so much. Probably like early 2000s. All right, let's take you now to Atlanta, Georgia, where the Secretary of State there, Brad Raffensperger, is holding a news conference. He says early voting will go ahead today, despite some of the devastation from Hurricane Helene. Let's listen.
Is going to mean your driver's license number. But no matter how you vote in Georgia, absentee, early, or election day, we require voter ID. And in Georgia, over 99% of voters use photo ID for their identification. So far, we have seen just over 250,000 voters request absentee ballots. Perhaps in the next week or so, we'll see that rise up to 300,000. And that, we think, will probably look like about 5 to 6% of all voters will be voting absentee this cycle. And that appears that there's be quite similar to 2022, 2018, and the earlier years. For all the people who love election data, statistics, and numbers, you can Google Election Data Hub Georgia, and it'll take you directly to data that is ongoing and updated continuously. I can't overstate enough the dedicated commitment of our Secretary of State elections team. That's headed by Blake Evans, who will speak here shortly, and also our county election directors. It was a total team effort, and Governor Kemp and GEMA, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, deserve high marks for their ready assistance whenever we needed quick solutions. We put our heads down, we did our job, and that's what people expect of us. A few counties have had to adjust a few handfuls of early voting locations because of these changes. Those changes are going to be shown on MVP My Voter page, and the local election officials will be using local and social media to get that out to their local communities. To Georgia voters, please make a plan on how you want to vote. If you want to vote absentee, make that decision today.
All right, you have been listening to the Secretary of State of Georgia talking about early voting, which is happening this morning, starting this morning, even though there has been some significant damage from Hurricane Helene. So let's get to CBS News reporter Jared Eggleston, who happens to be right outside of an early voting site where, by the way, former President Donald Trump is expected to campaign today. So Jared, on last election in 2020, former president was against early voting. This time, he seems to be somewhat for it. What can you tell us about what you're seeing on the ground?
Vlad, good morning. This is the first day of early voting, as you heard the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, talking about here in Georgia. And many people, election officials here, are urging everybody to do that, to make sure that they are able to cast their vote, especially in those areas that you heard the Secretary of State talk about that were ravaged by Hurricane Helene just a few weeks ago. Here where we are in Cobb County, we're just north of Atlanta, one of the Atlanta suburbs. That is where, like you said, the former president is expected to campaign just down the street a little later on tonight. But we've been talking with voters for the last little bit out here at the Cobb County Election Center. This is one of the bigger early voting sites here, and there were a lot of people out here, and poll workers told me that this morning was super busy as well. And all of the voters we talked to, no matter if they're voting for Vice President Harris or former President Trump, they are just excited that they are able to be out here casting their vote this morning, Vlad.
All right, so let's pivot to another story that you're also covering this morning for us. The former special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, he is set to testify before the House Judiciary Committee today. The Republican-led panel is looking, as you know, into this romantic relationship that he had in the past with Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. What are you hearing about that, Jared?
So, Vlad, within the last half hour, our teams up on Capitol Hill actually spotted the former special prosecutor Nathan Wade entering his testimony. So it's safe to say at this point that it is underway as we speak right now. He is expected to face questions about the Fulton County District Attorney's office. Jim Jordan, who is over this House Judiciary Committee, is looking into what he says the politically motivated indictment of the former president in Fulton County. That's in Atlanta, just down the street from where I I am. So he's been looking into this investigation, something that, like I said, he calls a politically motivated investigation. For a while now, he's been trying to subpoena several people in the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, and this is the first one that we know of that is actually going to testify. You might remember, Vlad, this special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, actually had to leave the case earlier this year after it was revealed that he and Fani Willis were having a romantic relationship. Both of them contend, though, that relationship, that he did not get that special prosecutor position because of their relationship.
All right, Jared Eggleston on the ground for us this morning. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it. Walgreens is planning to close about 1,200 stores in the next 3 years. Company officials said this summer that the underperforming stores could close in an effort to boost business in the U.S. Pharmacies have been dealing with lower insurance reimbursement and increasing costs. At the beginning of the year, Walgreens reduced what it pays shareholders and cut its fiscal year forecast in June. We are following two major cases in Washington and Kentucky. The Supreme Court is taking up the issue of a man who failed a drug test and lost his job after taking a product that claimed to contain no THC. And a retrial is beginning in federal court for the former detective charged with violating Breonna Taylor's civil rights. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, we want to take you now to Raleigh, North Carolina, where Governor Roy Cooper is holding a news conference on the state's response to Hurricane Helene. Let's listen in.
Have made significant progress in restoring power, water and cell service, opening roads, distributing critical supplies, and providing support to those who need it. Power outages are now a little under 13,000, down from 1 million at the beginning. Closed roads are at 580, down from about 1,200. Many water systems and wells are now operational. However, challenges do remain in restoring water to Asheville and some other communities. FEMA has approved 77,000 people for individual assistance, with more than $99 million already paid out. FEMA is paying for temporary stays for more than 1,900 people in hotels, and together we're working on more temporary housing. We're thankful to our National Guard and our active duty military personnel who partnered on this critical mission. North Carolina's National Guard was in Western North Carolina before, during, and after the storm. And we believe this was the fastest and largest integration of active military soldiers working with the National Guard in North Carolina history. Their work has been critical at a key moment in the response. And thanks to this strong operation, significant progress has been made in search and rescue, getting supplies where they're needed, and transportation assistance. I am so grateful.
All right, that's the governor of North Carolina. They're giving an update on the state's recovery. You can see the governor explaining that although power is still an issue, for some people it has dramatically reduced the number of power outages. There are only about 13,000 folks still without power in the state. However, there are still some areas of the state, as you saw earlier from Janet Shamlian, that are facing a very, very uphill battle to recover their homes, their belongings, and in fact, their lives. So we're going to stay on top of the governor's comments and all developments happening across the Southeast in the wake of that hurricane, Helene, and we'll bring you updates as warranted. Meanwhile, let's move over to Washington, D.C. now, where the Supreme Court is expected to hear a case involving a mislabeled medical marijuana product. A commercial truck driver suffering with hip and shoulder injuries took the product, which claimed to have 0 THC. But then that driver later failed a drug test and got fired from his job. I want to bring in Jessica Levinson for more on this. She's a Loyola Law School professor and a CBS News legal contributor. So, Jessica, break down, this seems kind of cut and dry, but there are complications. So what do the judges have to actually think about and consider?
Well, hi, Vlad. It is Supreme Court season, and here we are dealing with a big case about what the RICO statute means. So this truck driver, as you said, he took a CBD product that was mislabeled. It did have THC. He failed a test. He lost his job. He lost his employment. And the question is one of statutory interpretation under the RICO statute, which is Is losing your employment the same as losing a business or property interest or having a business or property harm? Or instead, is it a personal injury, in which case you cannot sue under the RICO statute? Why, Vlad, does it matter so much if you can sue under the RICO statute? Because you can get treble damages if you successfully sue under that federal law. So this is a big difference for plaintiffs in terms of their level of recovery. That's what the justices are looking at today.
So explain, I think a lot of people watching this, Jessica, are not going to understand how RICO even applies to this, because most often when we hear RICO, we think John Gotti and Al Capone, and not a truck driver who put a lotion or a cream that contained a product that he was unaware of and then got fired from his job.
Or maybe they now think about the Georgia election interference case where we see a state RICO charge, which I bring up to say that RICO is more than about John Gotti, right? It is about a group of people, I'm being very broad here, making a determination to engage in unlawful behavior. It is how you get organized crime families, for instance, or gangs, when you can't get them on other underlying claims here. So the underlying claims here are wire fraud and mail fraud. And what he's doing, this truck driver, is adding on a RICO charge, again, a RICO claim, again, because it would allow him to recover more damages. How is he allowed to do that? In part because we're talking about a federal case where we have CBD crossing state lines, and he says that the maker of the CBD products knew what they were doing.
Jessica Levinson with the one conversation today that actually made me smarter. Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate it. All right, the MLB playoffs are off to a strong start. We're going to take you to Yankee Stadium for a look at the series so far and what's next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The New York Mets tied up their series with the Dodgers, and the Yankees took a 1-0 series lead over the Cleveland Guardians. CBS News New York reporter Christina Fan has more. Christina, good morning.
Good morning. Home runs propelled both the Yankees and the Mets to playoff victories yesterday. Both New York teams seem to be gaining momentum and are now just 3 wins away from the World Series. Last night, the crowd was wild at Yankee Stadium as the Bombers beat the Guardians to win Game 1 of their championship series. The Yankees were led by sluggers Juan Soto and Giancarlo Stanton, who both went deep, electrifying the Yankee crowd. The Mets on the road in Los Angeles had a much more difficult start, losing their series opener to the Dodgers. But the Amazons, who have been fighting back all season long, did so again Monday night, tying the NLCS at 1 game apiece. Now the Mets will be playing their next 3 games at home at Citi Field beginning Wednesday night. The Yankees will be back at it tonight, playing at the same time, the same place, and of course hoping for the very same outcome. Reporting from Yankee Stadium, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
All right, take a look at this. Police in Ohio say one of their officers was, quote unquote, attacked by a giant inflatable pumpkin. Whoa! Okay, maybe attack is a strong word, but it's what they said. I didn't say it. Here's what happened. An officer responded to a call for a runaway Halloween decoration in a town west of Cleveland, and when he went to try and stop the pumpkin from crossing the road, it enveloped him. The department's Facebook page says backup came. Can you imagine? Hey, APB, look out for giant pumpkin on the loose. They then returned the decoration. Why would you just roll up to it with a pin? Like pop that sucker, right? Like, you actually think a little human being is going to roll up to it with your hands spread up like this to try and stop a pumpkin that's 3 stories high? Oh, boy. They returned the decoration to the owner. Police also pointed out that no officers or pumpkins were harmed. I would have harmed that pumpkin, Grant. I would have harmed that pumpkin, Grant.
You would have gone in there, right?
I would have gone in there with a bunch of needles. I would just use my taser right on it.
I'm going to handle this, and we're going to take care of it right now, for sure. It looked like the pumpkin was baiting them, though. Like, right, come on in. Hey, guys, real quick, it is definitely fall-like weather across the eastern half of the United States. A lot of 50s out there, even some snow in the higher elevations of the mountains. But we've got record heat still again today in Texas. Vlad, back over to you. Have a great day.
You too, Grant. See you tomorrow. Thank you. All right, that does it for me, but stay right where you are. Elizabeth Cook is live from San Francisco with all the breaking news coast to coast after the break. This CBS News 24/7.